The following special program is brought to you by Palmetto State Armory.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veterans Voices on WSAV. I'm your host, Patty Turner. For the next half hour, we will bring you unique and inspirational stories of veterans and the people who helped them. Our first story, not I, but we. Those are words to live by for one World War II veteran when reflecting on how he survived that conflict and life nearly 80 years later. Retired Army Major Anthony Grant recently celebrated his 100th birthday, and he shared some of his experiences and secrets of success with reporter Don Roberts.
I am doing great. It's a wonderful afternoon.
That positive attitude and a sharp memory have been hallmarks of Mr. Anthony Grant of Hampton. He was 21, living in New York's Harlem borough.
I was working as a printer's apprentice. Eventually, of course, I became a journalist.
Grant was born in New York, but spent most of his early years in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. Shortly after returning, he was drafted.
I realized that once I got into the Army, my life would be changed forever.
Grant trained at the Army's Fort Dix, New Jersey, and Fort Lee in Petersburg, Virginia. And that's where he got his first real dose of racism in the armed forces.
So there was a town called Grenada, Mississippi, and I was in the camp near the base for 6 months, and I went in town only twice.
Attitudes in Mississippi were about the same. Grant, like many blacks in World War II, were assigned to the Quartermaster Corps, loading, storing, and delivering supplies to troops on the front lines. And in June of 1944, those front lines were Normandy, France, days after the massive Allied attack known as D-Day.
Within the beach itself, it was a complete chaos. Burned equipment.
And as the combat troops pushed forward toward Germany, that's when Grant's troops came under fire.
I've been shot at, and I in turn have shot my weapon.
After the war, Grant moved up the ranks in the Quartermaster Corps while serving all over Europe, Korea, and Japan. He retired after 20 years with the rank of Major in 1963.
You've reached the ripe age of 100. Do you have a secret for longevity?
Have a positive mind. Have a positive mind. Things will get better tomorrow.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Don Roberts.
Major Grant's legacy will continue. He has 9 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandchild who will tell his stories for years to come. Meanwhile, every book tells a story. Some just take longer to tell. Like this little book, which held the secrets of a World War II hero for 7 decades. The prayer book was given to Edmund Eddie Sternot for his Catholic confirmation as a child. Well, he took it with him when he went to Europe to serve in the war. Sternot was killed in action in the Battle of the Bulge in January of 1945, but his prayer book stayed on the battlefield. It was found years later in a forest in Belgium. Well, fast forward a few decades, and an Army veteran in Colorado got his hands on that book, and he decided to do some research and discovered Sternot earned a Silver Star for heroism just days before his death, but his award was never given to him or his family.
That medal had never been presented to the family, that the family actually never knew officially what he had done on the battlefield. That created an entirely different chapter to this, which only recently was concluded.
It's wonderful, and I'm glad he finally got his due justice.
That's Sternot's only living family member, a first cousin named Dolores, who was on hand as the war hero was finally honored with the Silver Star, along with a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart for his service in World War II. Dolores says she's proud of her cousin's service in the war and thankful for Bill Lynn, the veteran who returned the prayer book and helped write the final chapter of her cousin's story. Well, just like every book tells a story, so does every picture. That's why a portrait photographer is traveling the nation taking hundreds of pictures of veterans. He's hoping to help tell their stories. Jeremy Hubbard has more.
All I remember was like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat.
When you've taken a bullet to the helmet like Bill Purcell has,
you got nailed down.
Your story has to be told.
February 1st, 1968, Way City.
Truth is, this entire room is full of Marines and sailors with unforgettable stories.
Here we go, right here. 1, 2, 3.
And a veterans charity is making sure they don't go untold any longer.
Just looking right at the camera.
John Reedy is a photographer for the Greatest Generations Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at preserving the history of American heroes.
Looking right to me. There we go.
The charity has been gathering groups of Vietnam and Korean War vets like this all over the country for portrait sessions.
This is probably the most meaningful work that I've done in my career. Looking right at the lens here. Nothing kind of compares with leaving something that has a legacy and has an impact that this kind of work does. Okay, gentlemen, can you get a little bit closer together? To see people when they follow me that they talk about how this actually can bring tears to their eyes to see the portraits, and to know that the work conveys that kind of emotional impact is kind of awesome.
It is a rare moment to shine for veterans who have never sought the spotlight before.
I was in Korea from all of 1952.
Men like 88-year-old Ted Gembinski of Colorado Springs, Colorado, who fought on the cold battlefields of Korea, the so-called Forgotten War.
When I wear my cap, or people can see that I was there, I just let them know it was my turn.
It's a big deal because I think that most of those guys, the Korean War vets, need to be recognized because they and the World War II vets were the ones that we built on.
Some of these men spent decades in the service. Some did more than one tour on the battlefield. For Dennis Sedlak of Longmont, Colorado, service is in his blood.
I enlisted because my dad was Navy and World War II, and that seemed the thing to do. You couldn't look your dad in the eye if you didn't serve. It significantly altered my life to the point that I will say that I am back from the war. I am not home from the war yet, and I'm some 52 years later.
I'm just looking right at the camera. Perfect.
Their portraits will be made into a commemorative photo book alongside 70 other Korean War vets from all over the country and more than 50 Vietnam vets.
Try to see into their eyes and just try to see who they were. Hopefully we can do that.
The books will be given to schools and museums all over the country so future generations can learn about their place in our past and how to hopefully keep what happened to them from ever happening again.
It's very important. History repeats itself.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
When Veterans Voices continues, a devastating injury that won't stop one veteran athlete. She was injured in Afghanistan, but she's still competing here at home. You'll meet the veteran who's not letting anything hold her back. Welcome back to Veterans Voices on WSAV. Monica Southall's life changed in an instant. When serving in Afghanistan, she was wounded in an accident, but her love for sports helped her cope and made her stronger. Natalie Calabet has her story.
We were a part of a forward operating base, which was Shank, that was constantly under attack. And they were also an artillery support base, so you never knew if the bombs you were hearing were incoming or outgoing.
In September of 2009, Monica Southall was a part of one of those incidents. She was working on top of a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle when bombs from an airstrike landed too close. Monica Southall's knees, shoulders, and spinal cord were injured. Between 2004 and the present, Southall has had 27 surgeries.
What I remember of that day, I was on top of one of the MRAP trucks doing inventory, and I remember my soldier coming to me and saying, "Hey, Sergeant Southall, come here for a second." And I was like, "Okay, just 1 second." And before I could even get to him, I heard it. I heard the bomb. I saw it, and I tried to get off the truck, and yeah, I fell. So that's pretty much my memory of that day.
Southall is not angry from the experience, but is honored to have fought on the front lines for our country.
It was something I'm very proud to say that I served and I was able to do my part to try and keep America safe. If I wasn't medically retired, if I could have stayed in the Army, unfortunately my injuries were too severe and I had to be medically retired, but I was hoping to do 20 years, and if I had a chance to go back to Iraq or Afghanistan, even now, I would still go.
As a former athlete, Southall has always made her way back on the track as an outlet to help give back through sports.
Sports have always been very important to me. When I came back from Afghanistan, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play the sports that I played prior to leaving.
But competing fell back into the lap of Southall as she was asked to participate in the Warrior Games and Invictus Games, where wounded veterans compete.
This is my very first gold medal.
A platform where she excelled, winning 5 gold medals in discus, shot put, and sitting volleyball.
Sometimes you need an outlet or you need something a reason to get up. And the games to me were a reason to get up every morning and train hard and just try and do my best, to compete, not only in life, but at the games as well.
The games not only served as a means of exercise and competition, but allowed Southall to meet Prince Harry, a memory she will cherish forever.
So in the picture, he's actually holding my medals, and he gave me the picture. So I thought that was very awesome from him, because he's a very busy person, he has things to do, but he was willing to take 2 seconds to give me the picture that he promised. What we try to tell the athletes is
Southall continues to stay involved as a coach.
I love giving back. I love being able to show other soldiers what I've learned through the games and what I've experienced and what I've been through, and also just pass on anything that I've learned as a soldier medically as well.
Southall's service and her perseverance in the face of adversity is an inspiration to us all. For Veterans Voices, I'm Natalie Calabet.
There are more than 500,000 people who rely on the support of service dogs in the United States. Service Dogs of Virginia is a nonprofit organization that raises, trains, and places service dogs with those who need it. Activities that most of us take for granted are a major hardship for a person with physical or mental limitations. While the dogs are in training, the animals learn about retrieval, pressure therapy, and medical alerts, among other tasks. Director of Development Sally Day says it takes a team of volunteers to raise the puppies. The dogs also learn the importance of taking cues from their owners.
The main functions of a PTSD dog are a little bit similar to autism dogs, and that is to be aware of physical signs of stress. So wringing of hands or jiggling of the leg, pacing around. The dog is trained to just come and gently bump or put a head in the person's lap if they're sitting down, like, hey, you're doing that thing that you do.
When the dogs are 18 months old, they are placed with their new owners. The whole process can cost up to $40,000. The nonprofit provides the dogs free of charge to those who need it. Well, here at home, one Low Country nonprofit is making a difference in the lives of veterans. We'll check out how they're inspiring others, one stride at a time. Down this scenic drive in Bluffton on Stillwell Road is a place where something just as beautiful as the scenery takes place. Lives are transformed with the help of these beautiful creatures.
There's some science to it, and there's a lot of mystery as well. Horses are bonding animals, and they love to bond with other animals or with people. And when they find that special connection between the people that we're riding with and our volunteers, that bonding just comes through. You think about this, you've got people that are controlling a 1,200-pound animal. That's very empowering when you can do something like that.
Living proof of that is Michael Holmes, a former Marine who suffered a brain injury in a snowboarding accident. He was in a coma for 2 months and could not walk on his own for 2 years until he met this guy, Doc.
For me, a large part is to practice my posture. Because of my brain injury, I tend to slump over like that. And then, more importantly, to practice my ability to command a horse, like using my speech and to tell him what to, and remembering what to say at what time, and then actually doing it.
On Doc, he feels in control of something when so much of his life has felt out of control. Building up more than just his physical strength, his self-esteem too. Even his sense of humor returned. What do you want Doc to do?
Doc not throw me. And that would be a key point.
So with the help of Doc, the trainers, and his fighting spirit as a Marine,
once a Marine, always a Marine. Hoorah!
The road ahead for Mike is much easier as he takes the reins of Doc and his life. Heroes on Horseback is a nonprofit, so if you'd like to contribute or learn how you could benefit, we've set up a link to their site on ours, WSAV.com. And stay with us when Veterans Voices returns on WSAV, Soldiers Communicating in Secret. We'll meet one of the last Navajo code talkers who spoke a language the enemy was never able to decipher. Welcome back to Veterans Voices on WSAV. Secret soldiers from the Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico helped in a big way to win World War II. From all across their homeland, hundreds of Native American men volunteered to become Navajo code talkers. David Romero spoke with one of the last members.
The greatest thing was sacrificing our lives for our country. It wasn't just a duty, it was a responsibility. And we knew that we had to defeat the enemy or they would defeat all of us, take what we had.
Roy Hawthorne and more than 400 fellow code talkers volunteered from both sides of the state border inside the Navajo Nation of New Mexico and Arizona. Now, the idea to use the Navajo language as a communications code in the Pacific Theater came from a military man who once lived on the reservation. He knew the Navajo language was incredibly complex and only known by a small group of people. Young Navajo men were recruited, and this was to create the code using common names in their language to describe the military terms like battleships, tanks, and reconnaissance planes.
It's quiet, doesn't carry any armament. That's a hummingbird. In Navajo, it was Dakitien.
In battles across the Pacific, code talkers would relay thousands of messages with no errors, and their code would never be broken by the Japanese. Hawthorne and the others had used their language as a successful weapon, a native language that was ironically often prohibited in reservation boarding schools at home.
The language was discouraged. The use of it was discouraged.
The role of the code talkers in the war was kept secret for decades. Only much later were they acknowledged and their story fully told. Hawthorne says despite the hardships his native people had endured on American reservations, when the war came, frustrations were set aside.
We were loyal to our country. It wasn't because it was called America, but it was called a people that were willing to do for other people. That's the way we treated one another.
Roy Hawthorne passed away in 2018. Very few of the original 400 code talkers are alive today, and there's a big push in New Mexico to create a museum to honor these heroes. Last year, the New Mexico legislature and the governor pledged more than $1 million to start construction of the museum. For Veterans Voices, I'm David Romero.
When one young woman joined the Navy fresh out of college, she knew she would see the world and bring home many stories to tell. What she didn't know is she would also change the lives of her fellow service members and their families. Second-class Petty Officer Chelsea Mandela served in the Navy for 7 years. She was a journalist who worked with all branches of the military, sharing stories from overseas and here at home. After she was honorably discharged from the Navy, Chelsea created a company called Troopster. She calls it the Amazon of the military. Family members from all around the world can go to Troopster and select a number of products to send to their loved ones serving anywhere in the world. Troopster guarantees it will arrive in perfect condition. Chelsea says the care packages are a huge morale boost. To learn more about Troopster or to send a care package to a serviceman or woman, just check out their website. It's troopster.com. When Veterans Voices returns on WSAV, telling every veteran story. We'll introduce you to a man on a mission to do just that. We'll show you how he is honoring thousands of veterans. Welcome back to Veterans Voices on WSAV. It would be hard enough writing one biography. Now imagine trying to write 400,000 of them. One history buff is on a mission to do just that. Jeremy Hubbard shows us how he hopes to give a voice to every U.S. service member killed in World War II.
We see a field of heroes who served their country. But Don Milne,
when you look at his date of death, it says June 5th, 1943.
Right here, he sees thousands of stories desperate to be told, and he wants to tell as many of them as possible.
His location on the ship, he probably was killed by the torpedo.
Milne lives in Utah, but visited Denver's Fort Logan National Cemetery as part of his new project, Stories Behind the Stars. His goal is to compile short histories of each of the 400,000 plus American service members killed in that war.
I got into this because I started just as a hobby because my kids are older and I have some free time. Every day I would write the story of someone who died during World War II.
In the end, he wants to create a searchable database, even a smartphone app, so users could visit a place like this, scan a name on a headstone.
Yep, that's his story, and we've got it all written here so someone could read it while they're visiting his gravesite.
And be taken straight to a webpage that tells the soldier's story.
And I think it'll give them an idea of what freedoms we have in this country, because these people paid the price.
It isn't going to be easy. So far, he's only compiled about 1,200 profiles. So he's enlisting help, researching these enlisted men and women. He wants family members and friends to submit stories about their heroes who died, and volunteers to help write about these historic men and women.
They just visit grave sites, find the name of someone who died in World War II, and write their story. If you can write an obituary, you can do one of these stories.
His objective may seem ambitious, overwhelming, and impossible, but compared to the goal these heroes fought for in faraway lands more than 75 years ago, it's the least he can do. For Veterans Voices, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
If you want to read these stories, or if you have one to contribute, just visit the website at storiesbehindthestars.org. Thank you so much for watching WSAV's Veterans Voices. We hope you've been inspired by these dedicated people as much as we have. And a special thank you to Palmetto State Armory for making this show possible. If you want to know more, check out our Veterans Voices webpage at WSAV.com. Have a great day.
Veterans Voices. Brought to you by Palmetto State Armory.